From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiot. It's Monday, August 11, 2025. Electric vehicle drivers could be hit with a road user charge sooner rather than later, under a plan to boost productivity. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is finalising the tax reform plans ahead of next week's Productivity Summit. Childcare subsidies should be scrapped in favour of direct funding of centres. That's the push by think tanks, advocates and some government MPs who say the current approach isn't working. Those exclusive stories are live right now at theaustralian.com.au. The former boss of Western Australia's naval base is worried about what a plan to relocate a commercial shipping port could mean for the AUKUS military pact. Vince Di Pietro says the move could make HMAS Sterling vulnerable to attack and disruption. That's today's episode. Earlier this year, former Western Australian Labor MP Kyle McGinn travelled to Washington DC. He wasn't there in an official capacity and he paid for the trip out of his own pocket. But he met with senior Republican and Democratic lawmakers while he was in town. At those meetings, Kyle McGinn secretly handed out copies of a 4-page document that could have big implications for the AUKUS military pact. That's the agreement between Australia, the UK and the United States to build nuclear-powered submarines. The document, written by the WA branch of the Maritime Union of Australia, warned a long-planned relocation of the state's commercial shipping port could bring foreign vessels uncomfortably close to its military operations. WA Premier Roger Cook said he wasn't aware of the document or Kyle McGinn's moves in the US capital until the Australian's senior reporter Paul Garvey called him to ask what he thought of it. Cook reassured Washington there was no need to be alarmed about the so-called Westport project and reiterated his government's commitment to it.
Our transformative Westport project, which will see the Kwinana Industrial District transformed and become a key export piece of economic infrastructure.
Kyle McGinn, who's a former seafarer with links to the Maritime Union, retired from politics in May after he failed to secure pre-selection for the federal seat of Bullwinkle. But his claims about the potential security risks of the state government's multi-billion-dollar port project have set alarm bells ringing for two of Australia's most esteemed military figures. Here's Paul Garvey.
This report, who it's prepared by, is pretty interesting. It's been written by the former commanding officer of the HMAS Sterling Naval Base, Vince Di Pietro, and also by Air Vice Marshal John Blackburn, who during his career held senior positions inside the Air Force. So these are people who have lived and breathed this stuff their entire careers. They've held very senior roles, and they've now prepared this report diving into some of the security issues that emerge from locating West Australia's main container port just across the water from HMAS Sterling Naval Base. These authors have identified the risks that are posed to the AUKUS submarines and to HMAS Sterling of having this high volume of foreign commercial vessels moving through what is the one and only channel in and out of HMAS Sterling.
Western Australia's main shipping port is currently located in Fremantle, about 20 kilometres southwest of Perth. Under the state government's plan, it'll move further south to Kwinana, where an existing port already receives about 850 ships a year. They carry commercial products like grain and aluminium. It's a stone's throw from the Henderson shipbuilding yards, where AUKUS subs and a new fleet of Japanese Megami frigates will be maintained, and the HMAS Sterling Naval Base, where additional US nuclear subs will be stationed from 2027. But the report by the Institute for Integrated Economic Research Australia found the Westport plan will double traffic travelling in and out of the port, and that could open us up to a very modern form of warfare known as containerised weapon systems.
It's a phrase that I guess is new to me and probably new to a lot of us, but basically it's shoving a whole bunch of military equipment into sea containers and trucks, and using that as the means to infiltrate behind enemy lines into foreign jurisdictions and then launch drones or other sort of weapons from those containers. It's what Ukraine used to attack those Russian Air Force bases earlier this year.
After a year and a half of planning, the drones were sneaked across the border in wooden crates packed on trucks, then driven to locations near air bases and launched remotely. The mission personally overseen by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Israel successfully used similar techniques in Iran. So they're arguing that you could see a scenario where an otherwise inauspicious sea container on a commercial vessel could actually contain military equipment which could be used to then attack the AUKUS submarines, or also just used to actually basically sink the commercial vessel itself, which, if it's in the right position inside that channel, could well and truly block the only exit and entry point into Coburn Sound for large vessels and the AUKUS submarines. Coburn Sound is the point through which all the refined fuel comes into Perth, so there'd be a massive impact in that regard. It's a key export point for some raw commodities and so on as well, so there'd be an economic impact in not being able to export those materials through that avenue. And then once Westport is in place, that would also be where all the containers come in and out of Western Australia. So you could see quite quickly a major disruption to the economy, to the daily lifestyle of Western Australians too, if suddenly fuel is cut off and the supply of goods into Western Australia is shut down in that sort of way. So it's a real vulnerability, and it all just comes down to that fact that there's just that one shipping lane in and out of this area that really seems to be the Achilles heel that this pair has identified.
There's been a lot of concern about continued Chinese ownership of the port of Darwin for very similar reasons, Paul. So is this really about Chinese shipping vessels?
Yeah, look, there's not mentioned explicitly China, but the inference would be that that would be where the potential greatest risk would be. But I think really it makes the point that any non-Australian flagged vessel could be potentially a risk here. And if we think about this containerised weaponry, you could envisage a situation where that equipment could board any foreign vessel at any port, potentially bound for Perth, bound for Westport, and wind up within a kilometre or two of a significant nuclear submarine base that's integral to the military, not just of Australia, but also to the US and the UK. So you can see quite quickly how you can get to a point here where there's an opportunity for a nefarious foreign power to cause some real disruption to not just the military, but also to the economy of Western Australia and Australia.
AUKUS didn't exist when Westport was conceived, and that means it's not immediately clear what risk assessments have been done in relation to the move.
The big one here is just actually what systems will be in place to screen containers coming into this facility that they don't pose that potential security risk there. And you think about how that would be done, that's quite a difficult thing. That's putting a lot of trust into the port of origin to either do that or find some means of doing that out at sea before the ships themselves enter that port. So you can see that would be quite a complex challenge, and it's one that these authors say that both the federal and the state government need to actually properly and publicly address.
Coming up, what America makes of Western Australia's shipping plans. Elbridge Colby is the United States Undersecretary for Defence Policy. That means he has the ear of Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth on matters of foreign policy, like China's growing influence in the Pacific. He's conducting a review of the AUKUS Pact to ensure it's fit for purpose.
I think AUKUS is really important. It's really valuable. I think the question will be in the implementation. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, because it would be great if there are more American submarines, more Australian submarines that are more highly capable. That is a win-win, but we can't sort of take it for granted and pocket the gains like we've already achieved that.
So, are possible security threats to vital military bases on his mind? Here's Paul Garvey.
Look, I wouldn't know if this is particularly on his mind, but There are plenty of parties out there that have a dim view of AUKUS, and every utterance in this regard gives those critics and skeptics some more ammunition for their cause. So in that sense, the timing of these issues being raised certainly isn't helpful to AUKUS. If you are a US decision maker looking for reasons to question this deal and potentially unwind or exit, then there's a good few pages worth of arguments put forward here by these two authors today.
Paul Garvey is a senior reporter with The Australian. You can read all his reporting, as well as the nation's best news, sport, politics and business, right now at theaustralian.com.au.